Hello there friends and welcome. Today we have some very exciting news for Baldur's Gate 3, because at long last we are finally getting new gameplay content. That's 12 new subclasses, so one for each class available in the game, with the upcoming patch number 8. If you've ever played one of the Pathfinder games, then you know something I really like is class customization, so I'm really happy to finally be getting more options for Baldur's Gate 3. So let's just dive right into that, first with the new subclasses in the upcoming patch. And of course we don't yet have knowledge on how they'll work exactly in the game, but at least we do have a preview on their most important abilities. First we have Bard and College of Glamour. Bard has always been one of the most OP classes in the game, if only because of the Swords Bard subclass, so let's see how College of Glamour can stand against that. With Mantle of Inspiration you can bestow allies with 5 temporary HP, not really that good I'm afraid, cause temp HP won't really stack in this game unlike Pathfinder. Or Neverwinter Nights. The second part however has the potential of being decent enough, as whenever enemies attack allies under Mantle of Inspiration they'll immediately get charmed. Although I wonder if it's gonna have a saving throw or not, because if it does, well, it's gonna depend on the enemy, since enemies on the hardest difficulty tend to have higher saving throws. Then we also have Mantle of Majesty, which lets you command charmed enemies at will, such as the ability of fleeing, moving closer, freezing, dropping to the ground, or dropping their weapon, which is kinda like the same effect as the actual command line of spells. Once again, I suppose my biggest concern for the subclass is that I don't think it will ever be able to match the OP Swords Bard. Also the fact enemies have to attack you first before getting charmed, at least through the classes or subclasses abilities, is kinda disappointing because, well, in a game like Baldur's Gate 3, if you're getting the Alpha Strike and attacking first before enemies is especially useful on Honor mode, which is of course permadeath, you are winning. So you really don't want enemies getting actions before your character, but hopefully they homebrew it to be powerful enough. Second we have Barbarian with Path of Giants, which appears to be a subclass focused into throwing enemies, something very fun. Barbarians will benefit from the Giant's Rage passive that grants both strength and size, allowing you to do additional damage with throw attacks. Also increased carry capacity. Of course, the increased throwing potential is the main attractiveness of this new subclass. In Baldur's Gate 3, throwing characters can be actually quite good, but only with a few throwing weapons. Even though you can throw anything, it's only a few specific throwing weapons like spears or tridents that are actually good enough when throwing because they get loads of extra damage modifiers. On the other hand, throwing let's say a sausage at the enemies, while fun enough, won't really do any damage, so hopefully the Path of the Giants Barbarian subclass has the ability to increase your throwing damage with all the other sorts of random items you can throw at the enemies, and of course, throwing the enemies at themselves. Next up we have Cleric and Death Domain, which has always been one of my favorite domains, at least for the necromancy flavor it has. Because by default it's not a particularly strong choice, at least in the Dungeons & Dragons games or Pathfinder. So as a Cleric of Death, you'll find a few dark new tricks up your sleeves, from spells that specialize in necrotic damage, so hopefully we have new ones, or at least the existing ones are enhanced by it, to even 3 new necromancy cantrips, something with decent potential because cantrips at least are free cast. And this will include Toll the Dead, a cantrip that causes damage whenever your Cleric rings the bells of impending doom, a number that can scale if your target has already been damaged. Good for combining with multiple actions at least. Or of course party synergy. Most importantly, something that has extreme potential is the homebrew ability to explode nearby corpses, damaging enemies. Of course it's going to depend on how high your damage can go when exploding enemies, but by default it's something very fun, especially when you consider other games developed by Larian, like the original Sin games, do have spells that let you explode corpses, and they can be very good. I mean, can't you actually just stack corpses in this game inside barrels and so on? So at the very least, it also has the potential for cheesy stuff, like dropping loads of stacked explosives. Hopefully, it also has something that can enhance necromancy summons like zombies and skeletons, which is my preferred part of playing Necromancers. Next we have Druid with Circle of Stars. This Druid will have 3 different constellations to choose from: Archer, Chalice, and Dragon. Each will favor a different playstyle and strategy, something always very fun, because it's even more options despite being the same subclass. The Archer will get Radiant damage with Astral Arrows, Radiant being fun because enemies don't tend to resist it, while Chalice will provide you with healing powers, and Dragon deal damage with added bonus to Constitution rolls. Sadly, as far as the tabletop variant, you have to trade your shape-changing Wild Shape ability for the Starry Form powers, so I'm guessing they won't have Wild Shape in the game. Kinda disappointing because you know the best Druid archetype, which is the Spore Druid, is not only the best summoner, but they still retain the ability of shape-changing, and you even get extra damage on attacks. So amazing for multiclassing as well. Hopefully, Circle of the Stars Druid has abilities that make it worthy enough. Meanwhile, for Paladin we have Oath of the Crown. And it appears to be a Paladin more focused on buffing allies, also tanking, as to take damage away from allies through, let's say, Divine Allegiance, or taunting enemies. Once again, it's gonna depend on how they actually implement these abilities, because, for example, blocking ally damage, well, kinda doesn't matter much when you have Alpha Strikes, so enemies don't really get a turn before your party can act. But Paladin is a very popular class for multiclassing, it's also pretty strong because of the Charisma synergy, so hopefully it's good enough. Meanwhile, for Fighter, we'll finally get a ranged focus fighter to Arcane Archer, which has been a pretty well-known D&D prestige class ever since 3rd edition, I believe. And of course, you'll have all sorts of new magical arrows and magical ranged abilities, from banishing foes to the Feywild, removing them from the battlefield for 1 turn, or unleashing psychic damage that forces enemies to make a wisdom saving throw or be blinded, which is a pretty nasty debuff in this game. Considering in Baldur's Gate 3 you already have magical arrows or arrows that do elemental damage as consumable items, I'm guessing they're going all out with magical abilities instead for the class. I just wonder how good it will be, because as far as tabletop, it's not a particularly good archetype compared to others. But you know, fighters are OP by virtue of something like Action Surge alone plus the extra attack action. So regardless of your archetype, it will always be a strong option in this game. For Monk we have something very fun, the Drunken Master. You'll have the ability of consuming alcohol straight from your inventory, as well as drinking other bottles you see around the Sword Coast in order to recover ki. Something very nice because it is your main class resource. By sharing the bottles with enemies and using Intoxicating Strike, you'll even get a buff towards AC and chance to hit drunk targets. Plus, drunken enemies will also be susceptible to other Drunken Master abilities, like Sobering Realization, which can sober up drunk targets, dealing physical and psychic damage, something that has the potential of being very fun. I mean, Monk is a pretty good class in this game. This is a game where you have a lot of different random items like food of all different sorts, also beverages, but they're usually only used as far as alternative resting resources, so it's nice to see you actually getting some use out of them now, like recovering class resources. Meanwhile, for Ranger, it appears to be a new archetype all about summoning, Swarmkeeper. You'll have 3 kinds of deadly swarms to assist your Ranger in combat, with Cloud of Jellyfish dealing extra lightning damage, potentially shocking enemies, then Flurry of Moths for psychic damage and blinding enemies, with Legion of Bees for piercing damage, and forcing enemies to make a strength saving throw or be knocked back, which is nice for knocking enemies into the void or dangerous areas of effect you create. Each swarm also has the ability of providing you with teleportation capability, something very good in a game with a lot of verticality, as to avoid enemy attacks or, well, get close to enemies that are fleeing or away from you. I just wonder how these will actually fare against the other summoner Ranger archetype, which is Beastmaster, and some of the summons there are pretty good. Meanwhile, for Rogue we have Swashbuckler. Play dirty by tossing sand at enemies to blind them, something that's always useful, or even disarming them. Besides that, fancy footwork as a passive to ensure enemies cannot make attacks of opportunity against you, something not really that useful in this game. But blinding and disarming can be good enough, especially because with disarm, enemies kinda waste their turn picking weapons. I do really hope this class is good enough, because rogue in this game, well, 5th edition as a whole, the fact they're limited to just one sneak attack per turn is so very disappointing when you're coming from Pathfinder or 3rd edition. Rogues really need all the love they can get. Then for Sorcerer, we have Shadow Magic. This will grant you superior dark vision, which is okay at most. You have spells that kind of overcome that, or races. Plus the ability to shadow walk between places of dim light or darkness. I imagine it's gonna be like a teleport. Then the Hound of Ill Omen power, which from the little animation here appears to be a new summon, hopefully a good one, since sorcerers by default are lacking summon spells, unlike wizards. Lastly, Strength of the Grave to prevent you from being downed, ideal for honor mode runs. Well, I'm not sure about that, because in this game in most battles you can always just run away from enemies if you know what you're doing. And you know there's no shame about retreating when it means not starting a 100-hour plus save from the very beginning. The Hound kinda looks like the dog pet you'll get, and of course you'll probably be able to have both. Now, while not actually gameplay related, Shadow Magic in Dungeons & Dragons has a lot to deal with Shar, who is the main goddess of darkness, shadows, and so on. Also Shadowheart's main goddess, so I wonder if you'll get some unique interactions with her. Then for Warlock we get Hexblade, a pretty powerful subclass in tabletop. You'll make a pact with an entity that can manifest in the form of magical weapons, with not only the ability of cursing and debuffing enemies, but most importantly, slaying enemies and automatically reanimating them back from the dead for 10 turns. This new summon can deal necrotic damage and even restore your Warlock's health. The 10 turns limitation though seems kinda sad, because summons in this game, they are kinda permanent and also unlimited, but 10 turns only, I guess it's the same logic as some of the other archetypes we covered. Chances are the enemies will be dead before the summon can actually kill them, because ideally you just want to kill them instantly. And with the other summons at least, well, they'll still contribute, because they can also attack as soon as battle starts and don't actually need something dead to attack them. Lastly, we have Wizard and Bladesinging, which is all about being a fighter mage, so a Gish. You'll get new spellcasting animations when casting spells with a weapon, which is decent but not really powerful gameplay-wise, and a new Blade Song ability to grant you supernatural speed, agility, and focus. Well, once again, it's gonna depend on how powerful the bonuses actually are, but the fact it supports a fighter mage playstyle is good enough, because by default, once again, bards in this game are by far the best fighter mages, since you have everything from just being a bard. You don't even need to multiclass. Hopefully the new Bladesinging Wizard gets something that can set it apart from bard, especially, once again, the infamous Swords Bard. Anyways, it's not just about new classes, because you'll also get new quality of life features, such as a photo mode, with improved camera settings, lens settings, scene settings, post-processing effects, also frames and stickers, so of course you'll be able to go all out with custom pictures you'll take. And since the game does have pretty nice graphics, I imagine it's gonna be fun. Now, patch 8 won't be released instantly, because it will go through a period of stress testing first, which is kinda like early access, I suppose, to iron all the possible remaining bugs out before the actual release. And the stress test will come in early January. So, well, there's a chance of getting access to all of these new subclasses before the actual full release. Last but not least, even a very powerful crossplay feature through all different platforms. Anyways, if you know me, then you know I'm all about the new subclasses all the way. Hopefully we'll get even more gameplay content for Baldur's Gate 3, because it is a thing that I've been missing the most with this game. Ideally a bigger level cap as well, but I guess that would require more story content, so it's out of the way, unfortunately. But anyways, new subclasses are good enough, especially if you also get new items, gear, spells, and so on. Well, and that was it for our upcoming Patch 8 news video for Baldur's Gate 3. By the way, what new subclass are you actually most interested in? Be sure to leave that in the comments down below. And I also highly appreciate you becoming a channel member if you enjoyed this guide. Thank you for watching and see you next time, friends.